Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome at our Brussels Talks event. This is the seventh actually already event in the series, and we are very happy to have today with us Professor Maria Leptin. She's, as we I think all know, ERC president. So we will have, I think, a very interesting and inspiring conversation in this 1 hour event that we are organizing as a National Center for Research and Development Office in Brussels, which cooperates with Business and Science Poland. Of course, we are from Poland. My name is Zara Kocińska-Lange, and I have the pleasure to run the office. But our public today is very international. We received a lot of registrations, more than 300 registrations from basically every single country, not only from Europe but even beyond. So the interest in ERC is quite high. Just for your information, as participants, few logistics. We are using the Click Meeting platform, which you of course know already. And you can communicate with us via the chat, and please do so. If you have some technical issues, write them in the chat, and also, of course, and we are very much encouraging you to write your questions in the chat as well. We will answer them, or basically Professor Maria Leptin will answer them during the event. But we also received quite some questions also before the event. And I'm afraid we will not be able to answer all of them, but we will try to do our best to at least post the ones that were appearing the most often. So that's for this technical introduction. And you will also receive after the event additional slides that Professor prepared for us. We will not use them during the event, but they could be a nice follow-up material afterwards, I think. That's the introduction, and now let's go slowly to the content of the of our event. And I think this event is quite timely. We had quite some announcements last weeks about the results from first calls in Horizon Europe for starting grants. We also have some results from proof of concept grants. We have some conclusions appearing now about the plans. We also have some sneak peek as it comes to the future calls and the future work program. So quite some news. And on top of that, I believe today is the 100th day since you took the office. So it's a really kind of a celebration and first summary maybe of things that were happening, and of course a nice moment to plan forward. So without a further ado, I will just ask you some general questions as a beginning, and we'll give you the floor for some introductory intervention, and after that we will go directly to questions and answers. So of course the introductory questions will be rather general, but I think it's important to be on the same page for all participants coming from different countries and different organizations. So we will be grateful for some general overview of the current funding opportunities that are offered by the ERC and how they are different to the other parts of Horizon Europe. And of course, what's actually also quite important, what are the main challenges at the moment that ERC is facing? There's always this famous discussion about the basic research towards applied. So if you could touch upon that, it would be also great. And another introductory thing, there's also quite an interest in how much ERC contributed so far to the fight with COVID-19. Of course, we all know that there's no topic orientation there in ERC. Everyone can submit whatever proposal they can. This is purely bottom up. But anyway, the question is related to this. If there are some ERC contributions to this challenge that we are all facing still. Okay, and that will be it for the introductory. So, Professor, the floor is yours.
Eva, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be called Leptin in the country that has produced Chopin. In fact, the English-speaking world calls me Leptin, which is wrong. The original is Leptine, which is probably Prussian and therefore perhaps also Polish. Who knows? Anyway, so you want me to go over the offerings of the ERC now, yes?
Very generally, yes.
A general introduction, okay, of what the ERC does. Okay, that's what you want now, yes? Okay, good. So yes, the ERC was founded in 2007. It was established by the European Union with the aim to reinforce, and I'm quoting this verbatim, reinforce excellence, dynamism, and creativity in European research. So that's what we've got to keep in mind. And what it does, it really supports primarily excellence in frontier research through bottom-up, individual-based, pan-European competition. Let me say a little bit about what that means. So bottom-up means that it is each researcher, him or herself, who decides what they want to propose and what they want money for. There is no top-down directives. It can be any area of academic endeavor, from the humanities through the social sciences, over physics, engineering, mathematics, to the life sciences. That's what bottom-up means. It comes from the researchers on the ground. Individual-based, it's individual researchers. You don't need to be a university, an establishment. You don't need to be a group. It's an individual researcher who can apply. And pan-European means anywhere in Europe. The budget is very generous now. It started out with 7.5 billion over a 7-year period over a framework program, which is 1 billion a year. We're now up to a very pleasant 2.3 billion euros a year. A main aspect of any of the work that is funded here is that the researcher has complete scientific freedom. There are no constraints, no strings attached, with the exception, of course, that it has to happen within the law. And within the law also means within all ethical guidelines that apply within the EU. So the scientific excellence, how exciting, how good, how original is the work is the only criterion for selection. There are no quotas for anything. You could have a bottom-up approach and still have quotas, but no, it's really only the scientific excellence. The support goes to the individual. I mean, it goes to the institution, but it is in the individual's power to do with the money what they want. No predetermined subjects. And the selection is done by international peer review. So very highly qualified experts in a range of panels, and I'll get back to those panels, judge each grant on its own merits. Let me say a little bit, before I go to what the ERC does, let me go talk a little bit about the structure, because that is not always generally well known. So the research in Europe is funded through the Horizon Europe program, which has several big areas. They're called pillars, as if, you know, they're holding up a big building. One is called Excellent Science. One is called Global Challenges and Industrial Competitiveness. And one is called Innovative Europe. So you can already see here that Europe decides to put its money into different domains, into different sort of purposes that are funded independently. The Excellent Science pillar contains the European Research Council and the Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions and infrastructures. The governance is also something that you should know about. So the work that is done at the ERC, and people just call everything the ERC, but in fact, there is an agency of some 500 people, dedicated, very highly trained people who manage everything. They manage the selection procedures, they manage the grants and the finances and the contracts with the institutions, and they manage the HR and everything else, the communication. So that's the executive agency. But then the strategy is set. So decisions about any items of importance of how the program is run, that is done by an entity called the Scientific Council. That's 22 leading researchers representing all fields of academic research and representing all member states of the EU. And they decide everything about how the funding is allocated in general, not the individual grants, but, you know, to what, in what structures it's handled, etc. And that's actually what I'm the president of. So the Scientific Council establishes the overall scientific strategy and the annual work programs. It decides on the methods and the procedures for peer review. For instance, right now, there is a discussion throughout Europe how researchers are actually assessed. Is it only for their science? Is it by impact factors? Is it also by other activities? So that's something that the Scientific Council would discuss. It identifies the evaluators. That's really important. So the council selects the panel members and proposes them, and it monitors the operations. So, but the ERC does things other than only dishing out money. It also thinks very hard about everything that concerns the way it functions. And in order to do that, there are standing committees and working groups that look at important issues. For instance, equal representation of gender, or, you know, equal chances for men and women. It looks at open science, questions like open access, open data, and now probably research assessment. There's another one that's called Widening European Participation that looks into the question of how countries that do less well in the competition for grants, how they can be structurally helped, what we can do, what others can do, what we can advise to create a more equal participation across Europe. And then there are ones that look at, it's called Science Behind the Projects, that just looks at what the projects actually do, how they function, and one that looks at innovation and relations with industry. So the council, and these are all council committees, they really concern themselves in a much broader sense with what is good for research in Europe. That's the standing committees. The executive agency, I've already said. So that was the council work. The executive committee, I've already mentioned briefly, but I'll just read out again what they do. They execute the annual work program. That means they actually do the work of helping to find the grantees and then administering the grants. It provides information and support to applicants. So there are scientific officers that really help both the applicants and the institutions to deal with the finances, to deal with open questions, to deal with everything that's to do with receiving and spending the grant money. It does, of course, it organizes these amazing panels we'll just get to, supports them, helps them, sets up the rooms, sets up the communication, etc. And it deals in communication. Now, you want to know what is this money that's given out? There are a number of mechanisms by which the ERC funds. The main ones are the pure research grants for individual researchers. that's the main set. And they are divided into 3 groups depending on career stage, so that a starting person who's just set up their own research group in a university or in a research lab doesn't have to compete with a senior person who's who's ultra famous and is well established and everybody knows them. So we have starting grants for people within the first 2 to 7 years after their PhD. Then they're called consolidated grants, which go up to 12 years after PhD. And then there's the advanced grants that go for the rest of your career. These groups can apply up to a ceiling, which is slightly different from them. So the starting grants go up to 1.5 million, the consolidated grants go up to 2 million, and the advanced grants go up to 2.5 million, in each case over 5 years. So what has become clear, or what had become clear over the years, is that in some of these cases, people make discoveries during their basic research that turns out may be of interest to industry or to society in general, some kind of use that goes beyond the basic knowledge. And to allow grantees to explore whether their work has such potential, they can propose to the ERC a 1-year proof of concept period to figure out, whom would I want to talk to, what patents do I need, who might buy my idea, and they can get up to 150,000 euros to explore this. And then finally, there are the synergy grants, which are now meant for groups of applicants, I think up to 4 or 5, 2 to 5 research groups who find that they have complementary and synergistic expertises that allow them to solve problems, answer questions, make discoveries that they as individual teams couldn't possibly do. And those grants can receive up to 10 million euros for 6 years for groups of up to, I think, to up to 4 principal investigators. So that's what the ERC pays for. Now, in come all these applications, and it's really thousands per year. How are they selected? Well, there are these famous panels, and I think there's a total of 27 panels now. What's a panel? A panel is just a group of experts with expertise in a particular area of academic research. They're grouped in 3 major blocks: the life sciences, the physical sciences and engineering, and the social sciences and humanities. And in each of these, there is a series of panels into which these large areas are subdivided into smaller areas. And the panels consist of, somewhere around 20 members. And they have to read all these grants. They get all the grants to read. They have to rank them. They have to decide which ones they look in greater detail, have a meeting about them, compare their notes. They're sent out to experts, external experts as well, to solicit input from really detailed experts. And then finally, these panels meet and discuss all the stuff that they've received and rank the grants which they've received from top to bottom. And then the top, about 16% at the moment, can be funded. That's as far as the money goes. There are more excellent grant applications than only 16% of the ones that come in, but that's how far the money goes. So, and the lucky ones then receive their funding and can do with it within the frames I mentioned, whatever they like, and are free to hire staff, hire students, postdocs, technicians, and carry out the projects that they proposed. So I think that's all I want to say for the moment. A final little bit of statistics. Not only is it my 100th day today, that's not so important, but this year is the 15th year of the existence of the ERC, and we've had over 10,000 successful grant applicants, over 200,000 articles from ERC projects were published in scientific journals. Over 75,000 researchers have been funded, over 850 research institutions in 85 nationalities of grant holders. So it's really very widespread. And I think the rest, I'd better just take your questions rather than going on talking. I just have to.
Yes, thanks a lot for this introduction. You've touched upon quite some issues I would like to follow up a bit. The main actually thing that maybe we can start with was also appearing now in the chat. That was also one of my initial questions. So let me just maybe put it on the screen already, because this is also one of the questions of participants. About the challenges that ERC is facing at the moment. I was rather limiting myself to the next year, maybe this year, next year, but we have here also a question going a bit further. So if you could elaborate on that, please.
Yes, thank you. That is from Dominic. I think Dominic is very wise to talk about 7 years, because really you have to think ahead. And if I think ahead of 7 years, then of course, that's when the next framework program starts. And what's clear is the challenge for the next framework program is to get your politicians in my country, politicians in all European countries, to recognize that we really need funding for basic research. And we need more funding. We could easily fund twice as many grants. You know, so many good grants come in. It's painful to have to tell them, sorry, we don't have money. So it's our politicians in our own countries, and it's also the politicians in the EU, the Parliament, etc., to recognize that and allocate more funding to fundamental and basic research. That's the greatest challenge. If you want to ask me how to do that, well, that's the challenge, to figure out how to do that.
Yes, indeed. There was also another question as a follow-up maybe to this one, because indeed this is quite obvious that a lot of ideas are there.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we don't have money. So I think that your
Yes.
answer was just what you said. Yeah, we have to just
yes.
push.
Well, no. There are many other ways. There are many.
Okay.
Sorry, there are many other ways. I don't think that's just wait. Let Maria get twice as much money for the ERC, and then we'll all be fine. No, I really think you also have to go home to your own politicians. And Poland is doing very well there. I mean, Poland, I have to say, has done much to support research locally. But in case people from other countries are listening, and also locally, praise your politicians for having allocated money to research locally. You've done 12 months of hard work preparing the application and the interview. Exactly. So you've done something valuable. If you've done an interview, you have made a big step. You've been selected from a whole bunch of grant applications who didn't get interviewed. Your country should recognize that and help you. So that is done in some countries. Some countries, the grantees who've made it to that stage can go to their research ministries and said, look, I've been successful here. How about you recognize that the ERC thought me worth interviewing and help me implement this work? That's something that individual countries could do. Some countries, I'm not talking about Poland now, some countries in Europe could easily raise their level of input into science. And this would be a good way, I think. The ERC does the work for them. It looks at the grants that come in from the country. It says, country, you've got these fantastic people whom we interviewed. The ERC is practically providing a free service there. It could be seen that way. So that's one thing. What can the science community do? So you, the community, should, of course, also contribute to your members of parliament being active in the next framework program to increase the amount of money for basic research. That's what citizens in the member states can do.
Okay, thank you. Let me now come back to my question as well, related to COVID pandemic and the contribution of ERC of the work done and the projects beforehand and currently to this challenge.
Yes. Well, you probably will all remember the beginning of the pandemic. It was in December. It's hard to believe. December 2019. It's unbelievable. So, of course, the ERC cannot do anything instantaneously. It can't suddenly say, we make all our researchers work on COVID, nor can it say we take away our money from awarded grants and give them to people who work on COVID. It can't do that. That is completely contrary to all the principles that I've told you just now. But as it turns out, that's not necessary, because the ERC at the time counted, just out of curiosity, the agency here counted how many of our grantees work on projects that are directly related to the problems that COVID research at the moment has to solve. And there were some 200 grants that were working on relevant stuff. So that's impressive. And remember, I stressed in the first slide that the researchers have full academic freedom, so they can use their full academic freedom at that point to do whatever they want. Now, I, at the time, was EMBO director, and EMBO doesn't fund senior researchers as such, but the members are leading researchers in Europe. And I asked, and in life sciences, and I asked around, I did a survey of EMBO members, very quick one. I only gave them a week to respond because we wanted to know fast. And said, look, guys, how many of you are doing something to help with the COVID crisis? This was very early on. It was in March or April 2020. And a third of the people came back and say, we're actively engaged in doing something. Some of them may just have said, we advise the local hospital, we provide gloves, we do PCRs for them, we do run PCR machines. But many said, we are developing assays. Vienna, the Institute for Molecular IMBA is a good example. They set up IMBA and IMP. They set up a screening service that is fantastic. Why were these people able to do that? Switch from one day to the next. A, because they had the knowledge that was funded through funding for basic research, and B, because they had the freedom I mentioned. Their grants didn't tell them milestones where they had to deliver X. When Y became more important, and everybody throughout Europe agreed that they could just do it. So we didn't need to do anything. What we had done in the past enabled these researchers to do what was necessary at that moment. And that's true for everything, that'll be true for climate change and ocean crisis. There are people out there working on the solutions.
Yeah, okay, thank you for this. Indeed, there was quite a discussion at the beginning of pandemic about that, and this information is actually quite important to know. Staying a bit with this kind of switch to more practical issues, there's a question we also received coming a bit more into basic versus applied science funded under ERC grants. We know that you also mentioned that of course this is basic, but there is this proof of concept there. There is also a link with the European Innovation Council. We will also receive quite some questions about that. So there is this a bit of touch of initiative a bit closer to market, even if it sounds a bit like science fiction for the basic science, but still. So how would you comment on that?
Yes, well, I've mentioned the proof of concept that takes into account the fact that basic discoveries are made and unexpectedly often and can be exploited. I really think the taxpayer is entirely justified to expect results from research to be exploited. And that is indeed what the European Innovation Council has been founded for. And I'm a great friend of that institution. and we have very good relations. It is very clear that it's totally complementary. Basic research is the remit of the ERC, and bringing things to market and helping applicants. By the way, it's bottom up again. We've got to understand that. Both the EIC and the ERC are bottom up. Nobody tells the EIC, you got to find people doing this, that, or the other. It's bottom up. It's, again, people who have an idea and who want help. And that's what the EIC is for. It helps them financially, but it also helps them to find private funders, private venture capital. And we're seeing actually in Europe, not necessarily the EIC, but in general, sort of venture capital and startups really blossoming. And the fact that that works was very clearly illustrated in the awards that were just made by the EIC a few weeks ago. Of the 43 applicants that were selected for being supported, 26 had previously held an ERC grant. So this just says that this pipeline that's been created by these two entities, which respect each other, but which clearly have different remits, that's working. I mean, I don't know what better illustration we could have that this decision to protect each and have each do their thing is the right decision. So I think the ERC does support applied science by supporting those people who will make the discoveries that will eventually lead to application.
Yeah, but giving them the floor to develop the idea to such a stage that it's ready for some follow-up activities under the EIC portfolio of projects. Okay, let's move maybe now to more international topic. There was also a question we received that it's related to the global competition and the position of ERC in this, especially towards US and China, but of course not exclusively.
Yes, I think the ERC is contributing to global competition by allowing the best researchers in Europe to do fantastic research. I mean, science and research are in their nature competitive. You can't discover something except by being first. If you're not the first at the North Pole, you haven't discovered the North Pole or whatever, you can take any example. So science is competitive. Scientists care about entering new territory. And by scientists, of course, I mean not only natural scientists, but also researchers in the humanities and social sciences, etc. So by enabling everybody to do their work in an unfettered, unhindered, and open way, I think Europe has become more competitive. I have to say, I find it very important that we shouldn't compete within Europe, but see ourselves as a unit. And the ERC contributes to that as well, I believe. So, it has, in the end, to come from the researchers themselves. And the way of keeping them competitive is giving them a good environment in which to do their work.
Yeah, indeed.
This may have been meant differently, but I'm asking the question that was asked.
Yeah, of course. And ERC is also, a great instrument, let's say, for attracting researchers from all over the world to do the research in Europe. So it's also
Eva, that's a very good point. Of course,
Europe
as a place to do research becomes more attractive for talent as well. That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that in.
Yeah, and I'm afraid I have to ask the most famous question recently about UK participants. This is also a pending topic, and it's even more broad at the moment, because there's the initiative I think launched yesterday. It's called Stick to Science. I don't know if you heard about that, of Swiss and British research institutions supported by a lot of different other organizations from all over Europe to allow them to participate not only in ERC but also Horizon Europe in general, which is at the moment not possible. So the question is, what your prognostics are about that?
Okay, I mean, I don't know in what circle of hell our poor colleagues in the UK are right now, but they're certainly in limbo. They're not in the sense that no association agreement has been finalized and signed, so they can't be awarded grants, but they're also not out. So in theory, they're still eligible. But I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't make any prognosis. I, along with everybody in the research community, and in the last question, I stressed the importance of Europe acting as a unit and behaving like a unit. And, you know, at the level of researchers, we collaborate with our colleagues in the UK, we collaborate with our colleagues in Switzerland, and we want to, and they want to as well. So it's to everybody's benefit. But it is not at the level of researchers now that this problem has to be solved. It's at the level of politics, and we are all hoping that that these agreements can be moved forward, and that our politicians will find the right agreements right at the top, so that we can then include the scientific collaboration in the agreements. We must hope so. It is to everybody's benefit.
Yeah, we do so. Let's wait and see what will happen in the next weeks and months. Hopefully not longer. Okay. Now let's change a bit the subject, but still we are talking about different parts of now Europe. There's a question coming here, but this is also related to what I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned in your introductory intervention that the different working groups within the Scientific Council, and there is also one dealing with widening. So what are the plans of ERC to strengthening the participation and indeed of scientists from, let's say, lower performing regions in terms of research, and indeed there's some other support available?
Yes, in fact, that's a very good point. And indeed, your country's council member, Andrzej Jaszczyk, is responsible for the working group on widening the participation. And he's introduced a very nice, his committee has introduced a very nice measure where researchers in those countries who want to apply for an ERC grant can be teamed up with a successful researcher from anywhere in the world in a relevant field, who will help them, who will guide them, who will, you know, train them not to make mistakes. So I strongly recommend that anybody who has the will and the wish to apply make use of this. And in fact, you know, again, Poland serves as a wonderful example. In this year's starting grant awards that were just made, I think Poland came in with 8 or so, highest number ever. So, and Poland itself has, of course, provided internal support for your researchers. So it's working. The only way numbers can go up is by high quality applications coming in. So inquire and get help, get advice. It really matters. There is so much one can, you know, even if you have a very brilliant idea and have the capacity to carry out that idea, if you don't present it well, if you're sloppy or whatever, you know, just get input and help.
Yes, indeed. We are very happy with the results of starting grant here in Poland. Never happened before, but of course we do whatever we can as well. And I assume since we have participants from many countries that NCPs are always there to help and work and do some preparations really specifically tailored to the needs of the application process to the ERC, which is a bit different towards other parts of Horizon Europe. Okay, I wanted also to ask you, because this is also quite important, especially recently with some emphasis put on gender balance in research. We have this famous gender equality plan as a formal criterion in Horizon Europe now introduced. But that's not only about that. This is more general about the approach to gender in research, to just take it really on board there. Not only and I don't mean counting the number of female in the research team. This is more about really covering the topic. So you also mentioned that there are some activities on ERC side related to that. So if you could give us some examples of what ERC is doing in that respect.
Right. So there's a number of things the ERC is doing. So, for instance, women get with children are allowed to delay they get an extra extension of the qualification deadline for starting grants, let's say, by a certain period per child. So, and that has a strong effect because, you know, if you're out with 2 children over a 5-year period, that affects the amount of work you can do, the amount of papers you can publish. So that has been very beneficial. The other thing is that the panels do get unconscious bias training and are reminded to take into account career breaks. There are a number of other measures like that. And by the way, it shouldn't only be, we remind the panels to take all sorts of potential inequities into account. For instance, it matters whether you come from an environment where, you know, everything is there and available for you to do your work, or from an environment where it's slightly more difficult to do high-level research. So all that is taken into account, and the panels are encouraged to look very carefully, not to be unfair towards those who come with whatever disadvantages, and for women. And what we've been seeing is a constant increase in the numbers. And in fact, in the last starting grant applications, we've had 41% of the awards going to women. That's the highest ever. So it's constantly going up. In the last proof of concept grants that were announced only yesterday or the day before, the success rate for women in a field where women really used to be rare, the success rate for the women was significantly higher than for the men. So I think the selection committees are beginning to notice it, and the panels are making sure that people are supported as broadly as they can. The sun has just come out in Brussels and I can't see anything. Let me just pull down the curtain. I'll be back with you in a second.
Yeah, okay. You can have a small break.
Yeah, no, I'm right here. I can hear you.
Yes, okay. So I think, you know, because ERC is so famous, and we also know that there are some Nobel laureates coming also from ERC grantees, that sometimes applicants can get a bit shy. So there are also some questions. Am I good enough, or is the institution good enough? So we also received a question very specific about the criterion of the host institution. Is this also important?
Yes. So the answer to that is very explicit and very clear. Not at all. The panels are instructed explicitly to judge the proposed project in its originality and feasibility, and the ability of the researcher who proposes it to carry it out. So, you know, if a complete crank comes with a good idea and says, I'll solve all this, but has never done anything in their life before, then they don't, then that doesn't work. But it's only the project and the applicant. Of course, I cannot guarantee that the panel member who looks at this doesn't have in the back of their mind. You never know what people have in the backs of their mind. We just don't know. But it's explicit, it's really explicit that the host institution is not to be taken into account when the merit of the grant is discussed.
Yes, thank you. And now coming back into the different disciplines, we know that there are those panels divided into main disciplines, but there's also the challenge of interdisciplinary grant and some issues that apparently are noticeable over there. And the question is related to that. What can you do about that? This is, of course, always a bit more tricky and difficult to evaluate, but maybe something could be done to manage the success rate.
Yes, appeal to the panels. It's very you know, there is a lot of an unconscious bias, and one of the strongest is that you favor people who are more like you, and it's very deep unconscious bias, and so that maybe makes these these applications suffer even when people try not to, but it has to be done through appeal. You know, panels can solicit input from other panels if there's expertise missing in their own panel. But the panels are broad, and there is a broad range of expertise, and so they really are, and it is known that interdisciplinary, I mean, there's a lot of evidence showing that interdisciplinary research tends to be more creative and more innovative. So it just has to be, people have to be constantly reminded of that, and an emphasis, the scientific officers who are present remind the panels and emphasize the need to listen to each other between the disciplines as very important.
Okay, thank you. And a question that, well, not directly, but still a bit of follow up from Natasha about the slightly less interest, let's say, that she observes as it comes to other parts of Horizon. You also mentioned at the beginning that there's this big pillar 2, and we have clusters, different topics over there. This is a top-down approach as it comes to what you could do in your project in terms of results, scope, challenges, impact, and so on. Is this the participation in those kind of projects has any impact on ERC chances, or is it as Natasha is asking, desirable to basically do both?
That's a really interesting question. You know, it is clearly politically desirable to have this option, otherwise it wouldn't be there. So it serves a purpose for, like I said, these decisions are democratically made decisions, and the citizens of Europe are entitled to decide democratically whatever they want. So if you feel that ERC is more popular, then politicians might have to find out whether that is anecdotal evidence, that it's your feeling, or whether that is so, and evaluate that. The other pillars, of course, have a purpose. And so citizens have to weigh the different purposes. You know, you may say people like a basic grant better than an EIC grant, but they're for different things. So you can't really compare apples and oranges. How much needs to go into each pillar? That's hard to say. So if we feel, if the research community throughout Europe, so if this is not just Natasha's, your opinion, Natasha, then you should make your voice heard. But perhaps you are alone, or you only talk to those people. I don't know the answer to that. I find it very interesting. But if you feel you have something to say, then you must say it. And we must use politics to achieve the end that you represent here. I would be happy with that, of course, for the reasons I've explained before. But I don't have the evidence for that. It'd be good to have the evidence. I can ask around whether we have it, and then one has to think how to act on it.
Okay, thank you. And well, since we know that it's quite competitive to apply and to actually really get funding from ERC, there are quite some questions related to trying again. So one is that is related to the resubmission, let's say, of proposal, and if it's somehow included the comments in the evaluation for the second time, or doesn't really matter if how the result was at the first time. And the second, maybe just I will put it directly here. This is already a bit of a suggestion. Is it possible to somehow just resubmit with some clarifications and additional information?
Okay, let me answer Elizabeth first. I mean, honestly, you should have a better chance than you had the first time round, because you've been given feedback, and you can see maybe you feel the feedback wasn't in sufficient detail, but you get an idea of the feedback and you can try again. You're working on the basis of a project that you've already formulated. And so I think only through that you have a better chance. Formally, there's no difference. Everybody is tested at face value. But again, I think if you've tried once and not, there's enough evidence that people trying more than once do eventually get in. Some don't, but then, maybe their project wasn't interesting in the first place. What I encourage you strongly to do is to solicit input from the best in your field on this. And if they say, well, this is weak, don't say yes, but listen to them. Listen. So if you've got a full proposal and you feel the feedback you got from the panel wasn't sufficiently deep and profound, then ask, next meeting, take your grant proposal along and find an expert and say, look, do you have time to talk to me for 20 minutes about this, or half an hour, or whatever? So that's how you give yourself a better chance, by building on what you've already done and getting your colleagues, which is fun anyway, to help you see the weaknesses of your proposal and eradicate them. The NIH cycle. This is also interesting. The ERC cycle, the ERC panels are completely overloaded. You're proposing this as a reduction on the burden. I can't comment on this because I haven't discussed this with anyone in the agency, but it is something I will take away. I hope somebody from the agency is listening. Otherwise, please send me an email afterwards, and I'll bring it to the agency and ask what the answer to this question is. It's interesting. Yes, it must have been discussed, and there must be a reason for why not. But
there are some colleagues from the agency present. I've seen, and I'm already grateful for answering some questions via the chat, because we surely have too many to be able to answer them out loud. But we still have some time, and I think this is quite an interesting question, because you mentioned that there are some group of researchers, according to their experience, that eligible for different kinds of grants on the ERC, but sometimes this is quite a wide group, let's say, with for a consolidator, for example. So someone might be just eligible, so very fresh in this group, someone with much more experience. And is it taken into account into evaluation or not during the evaluation?
So I think, you always think, I'm competing against these big shots there and I have no chance. When I was a panel chair, there weren't any consolidator grants. So we had everything from post-starting to advanced, and in the first year. Later they became. And of course the panel says, somebody says, oh God, look what this person has published and the other one hasn't. And then we say, well, come on, he or she is old. And in fact, if a senior person had flaws in their grant application, that was seen as much more damning and negative than a junior person having flaws. So in a way, a lot more is expected from the senior ones. And this was even between, what would now be consolidator level to senior level. And so similarly, in the consolidator cohort, you know, you're not so far apart over that period. And the panel looks at how old you are, and they take into, you know, we've all been at that stage, so we know you can't compare people at the beginning of the year with late in the career. It's a little bit different in the starting grants. There we do see a greater success when they're more senior, but that's not surprising because you've actually only established yourself as really independent towards the end. But in the consolidator period, I would doubt that it made a lot of difference whether you're a few years more junior than the others or not. You know, the excellence of the proposal shines through always. And bean counting of, you know, I mean, how many meetings you've been invited to, that's not the deciding factor.
Yes, thanks a lot. I'm just going through the chat and looking for some last question, maybe, since we are already coming to an end. And I guess I will put, it's a bit of a longer one, but quite interesting, I would say, about the career progress in different fields. And the years and the requirements that varies in those fields. So, is there any plans to fine tune the criteria for that?
Very interesting question again, and it highlights a conflict of two desirable policies. One is everybody across the board is treated equally. And the other is we take into account what you, Liva, here spell out. It's difficult. And of course, the question of research assessment has become a big one. I've already mentioned this. Everybody is thinking about how we do better in judging scientists and their careers and their proposals. So I think this is something that the Scientific Council may want to pick up again and look into. It's been discussed in the past. This is a constant sort of, I won't say tension, that's too strong, but is something that is constantly discussed. So there's awareness of it. And again, in the end, you know, it's the individuals from your field who judge you and who bring those concerns to the panel in which they're sitting.
Yes, thanks a lot. And I think it's a good summary, maybe even to our event, since we already have 3 p.m., which is the time we should finish. I will just surely comment on the last thing, because indeed maybe this is something to be taken also by the ongoing works on the research assessment in general, that we know that the European Commission is also running. There's this famous coalition of the willing interested in working on that and changing a bit this bibliometric approach to something a bit more related also to other experiences that researchers may have during their career. Okay, we still have some questions there in the chat, but I think that we covered most of the topics. And also thanks to your colleagues from the agency, we also have some other questions, some more technical answered there. I think that the main message maybe should be repeated once more, that anybody representing any field of science can apply. So questions asking whether I'm fitting with my area, my experience. Yes, you are fitting. This is the advantage of ERC. Well, let me thank you again for being with us, for joining us today, and being so open to all the questions we had. Well, we will follow up, as I said, to the participants with slides. You will receive them by email shortly after the event. This is maybe good to just save somewhere and to look into some basic data and statistics as well. And yes, I'm also inviting you already to another Brussels Talks events. This is a monthly event, so every month we are choosing a different topic and different distinguished guests. So we will stay in touch with you. And Professor Lepton, again, thank you very much.
Okay, it was a pleasure. Thank you for the good questions. Really always interesting. And thank you for the additional input. So I take it someone from the agency has taken note of the questions, and everything that's been brought up by you will be discussed here internally. So good luck with your applications, those of you out there who are planning to apply.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.